You don't know her name, but you've seen her face. She posted something tone-deaf just once. A lazy joke, an out-of-context clip. Her face appeared in your feed, framed by outrage.
And something in you reacted fast.
You didn't post anything cruel, maybe just a retweet. Maybe just a comment, nothing too personal, just enough to say you were on the right side. Maybe you didn't say anything at all. But you watched, and it felt righteous. Now she's gone, a job lost, a name smeared, an apology dissected, rejected, forgotten. And still, something in your chest won't settle. A question you don't want to ask, why did that feel so good? Carl Jung, the Swiss psychoanalyst who mapped the unconscious, once wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But that only works if we stop and look. Most people don't, because most people aren't afraid of others. They're afraid of the mirror. The part of you that wants to be seen but is afraid to speak hates people who speak too much. The part of you that feels not enough resents those who look like they've never doubted themselves. The part of you that longs to be forgiven cannot stand to watch someone else be forgiven first. These parts, hidden, repressed, buried beneath performance, don't disappear. They become the shadow. And when we refuse to meet that shadow inside ourselves, we start seeing it everywhere else. We don't call it projection, we call it opinion. We call it commentary, we call it truth. But what it really is exile. Jung didn't say the shadow was evil. He said it was everything we couldn't accept in ourselves. Our anger, our envy, our need, our shame, our hunger to be loved, our fear of being ordinary. We don't just hide those things, we hate them. And when we see someone else embody them, we strike. We don't see a person, we see a threat. But that threat is not external. It's the part of you still waiting to come home. We live in an age of constant reaction. But behind every reaction, there's a reflection. And if you look closely, you'll realize you weren't offended because they were wrong. You were offended because they were you, and you weren't ready to admit it. The ritual starts with a whisper, one voice, one accusation, a single screenshot out of context. Then it spreads, not because the crowd understands, but because the crowd recognizes something. Something it doesn't want to face. Jung warned that when we fail to make the unconscious conscious, it controls us, and we call it fate. But on the internet, that fate plays out as a ritual, ancient, predictable, brutal. The scapegoat has returned. In the Hebrew tradition, once a year, a goat would be symbolically loaded with the sins of the community. Then it was driven into the wilderness, banished, destroyed, so the tribe could feel clean. The goat was innocent. Its suffering wasn't justice, it was catharsis. Today, we no longer use goats. We use people, real people, with faces, with families, with flaws. We pin our disgust, our fear, our guilt onto them until they become the sacrifice. The woman who speaks with too much confidence. The man who cries in public. The kid who wants to be loved so badly they post every day. They become symbols of arrogance, of weakness, of narcissism. But what they really become is us. The parts of us we weren't allowed to show. The selves we buried to survive. The pain we couldn't metabolize, now externalized, pixelated, and punished. And we call it progress, but behind the mask of social justice, there's often a much older impulse purification through projection. The hope that if we destroy them, we will no longer feel the discomfort of being us. In every angry comment is a buried confession. In every viral takedown is a desperate plea. Don't look at me, look at them. But the shadow doesn't disappear when we point at it. It grows until one day it turns around. Imagine this, a boy logs onto his account. He's never had much of a voice in real life. Online, though, he's quick, funny, sharp. He joins in mocking a stranger who made a mistake. His post goes viral. The next morning, someone digs through his past posts, finds a moment, takes it out of context. He becomes the new goat. His apology is torn apart. His followers disappear, his inbox fills with threats. And in the silence that follows, he hears it, his own voice, broken, unmasked, and asking, was it always me? Kierkegaard once said, the crowd is untruth. Not because the crowd lies, but because once you hide in a crowd, you don't have to know yourself. You just have to hate the right person. And that's the danger. Not that we become monsters, but that we forget we were ever anything else. The internet didn't invent the shadow. It just gave it a screen name. Once your projections had limits, you judged the people around you, their posture, their tone, their choices. And then you moved on. They lived in your neighborhood, not your mind. But now your shadow has scale. Now it scrolls. And it doesn't scroll for truth, it scrolls for recognition. Every click, every like, every pause is a mirror held to your unconscious. Not to show you what's true, but to reflect what still lives inside you. Because the algorithm is not built to inform you. It's built to confirm you, to provoke you, to amplify the shadow you've refused to meet. Carl Jung called this the splitting of the personality. When the gap between who you are and who you pretend to be becomes so wide, the mask begins to crack. But in this age, we don't just split, we curate. We perform a self we can bear to live with and bury the parts that don't get applause. The doubt, the rage, the envy, the shame, these don't vanish, they go digital. They reappear in the faces of strangers, in the smugness of that influencer, in the oversharing of that friend, in the confidence of that woman who reminds you of the voice you were once told to silence. You react, you post, you judge. And the internet cheers you on, because it doesn't care if your shadow is integrated. It cares if it's active, it rewards outrage, it exalts derision. It feeds you someone to hate and asks, would you like more like this? You click yes again and again and again. And every time you do, you step deeper into a house of mirrors. Not one that reflects who you are, but one that reflects who you're most afraid of becoming. Until you no longer know the difference. You think you're just scrolling, but really you're performing shadow puppets for an audience of shadows. And you don't even realize the strings are yours. Because projection doesn't feel like projection. It feels like truth. It feels like certainty. It feels like justice. Until the moment it turns on you. And the light you used to shine on others begins to expose your own cracks. No one thinks it will be them. You've seen people fall, watched them apologize, watched them disappear. And you told yourself, I would never. But masks don't warn you before they crack. One day something small breaks. You reread your own comment and feel nothing but disgust. You look at the person you've become online and don't recognize the voice. You open your phone and it feels heavier than usual, or maybe it's louder. Maybe the mob finds you. You said something they didn't like. Or maybe you didn't say it loud enough. Maybe they dig through your past and hold it up like a crime. The crowd that once applauded now demands your erasure. And suddenly the same mirror you used to shine on others is turned toward you. And what it reflects is not who you thought you were. Carl Jung called this moment the nekya, the descent into the unconscious. The death of the false self. Not punishment, invitation. The persona dies, and with it your illusions. And something deeper begins to speak. You remember the lies you told to be liked. The softness you buried to be respected. The anger you swallowed to be accepted. You see all the ways you made yourself small. All the cruelty you labeled as honesty. All the applause you confused for love. And beneath it all, you meet the one person you never gave a voice to. You, not the curated one, not the clever one, not the safe one. The self you exiled when you chose to become someone who fit. And for a moment, there is no audience. No content, no claps, no cause. Just the silence of an identity unperformed. And in that silence, something extraordinary happens. You don't panic, you breathe. You realize the collapse is not destruction, it's return. This isn't a breakdown, it's a breakthrough. The gift of the shadow is not fear, it's freedom. To say, yes, I hated what I couldn't admit I needed. Yes, I mocked what I never felt safe to express. Yes, I projected because I didn't know how to protect. This is how transformation begins, not in the spotlight, in the dark. When the mirror shatters and you see not a villain, not a victim, but a soul, imperfect, unpolished, undeniably yours. And the stranger you've been running from? He's been waiting at the edge of the reflection this whole time, ready to become real. Healing never begins with performance. It begins in the absence of it. No post, no defense. No clever narrative to win back favor. Just the quiet confrontation with the parts of yourself you've edited out for years. The parts you used to cast onto others because you thought holding them would be too much. Now there's no one left to cast them onto. So you pick them up, piece by piece. This is not redemption, it's recognition. That your rage was grief in disguise. That your arrogance was a plea for dignity. That your silence was not strength, it was fear. Jung wrote, "The shadow is a tight passage, a narrow door, whose painful constriction no one is spared who goes down to the deep well." But that door's not locked. It only demands that you bring your whole self through it, not just the parts that get applause. You begin to notice how quickly you used to judge people who reminded you of what you hadn't yet accepted. You see how your cynicism wasn't clarity, it was protection. And how the outrage you thought was activism may have been a mirror you weren't ready to face. But now you're facing it, and you don't flinch. You begin the slow, tender work of reintegration. Not perfection, not purity, just honesty. You don't rush to correct everyone anymore. You start to listen for what they're not saying. You recognize the projection in others because you've begun to disarm it in yourself. And you stop needing to be seen as good because you finally made peace with being human. This is individuation, not enlightenment. Not escape, but becoming. You feel anger rise and say, "I see you." You feel jealousy whisper, and instead of shaming it, you trace it to the dream you abandoned. You feel the desire to tear someone down, and instead you ask, what part of me still believes I'm not enough? And in that moment, you no longer need to punish what you don't understand, because you understand yourself. You recognize the shadow not as a threat, but as a teacher. And where you once drew a line between you and them, you now see a bridge. You're the one you used to cross without knowing, the one that now invites you forward awake. There's a stillness that comes after the storm. Not because the storm is over, but because you've stopped trying to control the weather. You see the world as it is now, not a battlefield of enemies, not a stage for performance, but a hall of mirrors where every reflection has something to teach you if you're brave enough to look. That's the thing about shadow work. It doesn't make you invincible, it makes you honest. You'll still feel anger, still feel judgment. Still catch yourself scrolling past someone and thinking, "Oh, not this again," but now you pause. You ask, why this person? Why this reaction? What's alive in me that needs attention, not projection? And in that question, the pattern breaks. You stop reacting to shadows as if they're threats, and you start responding to them as if they're messages. Jung said, knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people. But this isn't about sainthood. It's about seeing people as mirrors, not monsters. The boastful one may be starving for validation. The angry one may be drowning in unspoken grief. The cruel one may be terrified they'll never be forgiven, and you? You're not above them. You're just willing to meet them where they are, because you've met yourself where you were. This doesn't make you passive, it makes you powerful. Not the kind of power that silences others, but the kind that makes space for truth, even when it trembles, even when it contradicts, even when it looks like something you used to hate. This is how the world begins to change. Not with louder posts or sharper takes, but with people who hold their own shadow with enough grace that they no longer need to throw it. You used to think compassion was weakness. Now you know it's strength. To see someone's worst moment and remember your own. To resist the urge to dehumanize even when it would feel good. To hold a mirror and soften instead of shatter. This is the quiet revolution. Not of ideas, of eyes. The way you now look at others. The way you now look at yourself. The mirror is still there, but the stranger in it no longer feels like a threat. Because now, finally, he looks like someone you can love. If this mirror showed you something you weren't ready to see, something you once denied, but now feel whispering back, don't let the screen close in silence. Leave a trace, a thought, a shadow you recognize. Because someone else right now is scrolling for a reflection. And what you share might be the moment they stop running. If this made you pause, share it. If it made you softer, subscribe. If it made you see more clearly, stay. The work begins quietly, but it begins with you. If this mirror showed you something you weren't ready to see, something you once denied but now feel whispering back, don't let the screen close in silence. Leave a trace, a thought, a shadow you recognized. Because someone else right now is scrolling for a reflection, and what you share might be the moment they stop running. If this made you pause, share it. If it made you softer, subscribe. If it made you see more clearly, stay. The work begins quietly, but it begins with you.